All right, we're going to go ahead and begin with our next afternoon session panel discussion at the Jobs Now conference. Let me introduce our panelists to you, if I could have everybody's attention. Thank you. Wow. Very responsive crowd. Can you guys hear okay up here on stage? All right. Immediately to my right here is Dr. Glenn Fenter. He's the president of Mid-South Community College. We are hoping to get our best Bill Clinton and Elvis Presley impersonations out of him today, as well as a community college president. No pressure. All right. Say thank you very much. Thanks, Glenn. All right. Tori Huggins is the lead welding instructor with Arkansas Pipe Trades Association, next to Dr. Fenter. Chris Massengill, the federal co-chairman of the Delta Regional Authority, and Joe Quinn, senior director of public affairs and government relations for Walmart. Some of you in this room may remember him from his Channel 11 Anchorman glory days. Can you do a little Ron Burgundy for us too? Would you promise us that before we're all said and done?
I left my red suit at home though.
All right. So now that we've introduced our panel, we have opportunity to ask questions as well, like we did at lunch with the microphones in the room. So we encourage you to do that. I'm going to try to lead us through some of this discussion as well, and I am going to starting with Dr. Fenter, just kind of talk about why they're here today, what they hope to kind of get across to you as an audience. So, Glenn, I will give it to you first.
Well, certainly we appreciate the opportunity to be here. Every time I'm involved in one of these events, I'm amazed at the staffing that must exist behind the scenes at the State Chamber of Commerce to overcome Randy Zook's leadership, or lack thereof. Yeah. I guess I'm really struck by the fact that we assume this is an Arkansas conversation, and really it's a conversation that's clearly occurring all over the nation. Problems are a little different, circumstances different, but certainly the deficiencies that are emerging within our economy are fairly standardized. I get them confused, so you'll have to bear with me. Two of my favorite philosophers are folks that probably are a little different in terms of their political direction, but sometimes I get Thomas Jefferson and George Carlin confused. I kind of can't keep up with who said what, but when we get to a place in our democracy when our educational systems are more effective at creating folks who are destined to be tax consumers than they are tax producers, then this conversation is no longer about economic development. It is, in fact, about national security. And I really believe that that's where we are in our country today. These are conversations that are inextricably linked to the future of our way of life. I think if you examined, and particularly in Arkansas, our educational structures and then tried to apply that structure against the demands of our global economy, you would have the same conclusion that I have long since reached, and that is if we were starting this over, it wouldn't look anything like it does today. Because quite frankly, when a person can't get a job coming out of high school, then we need to be changing the high school model. When a person is expected to go beyond high school, then we need to be making the access to whatever that beyond is much more a part of our system design than it exists today. We can't afford to allow people to continue to come out of our public schools without the ability to take care of themselves or provide for themselves in the future. And a lot of what we're doing in Eastern Arkansas is trying to re-engineer that model. But at the end of the day, I think Arkansas is uniquely positioned. The jobs that are going to be emerging in this new global economy, particularly in southern states, are going to be jobs that probably didn't exist 10 years ago. They're going to be jobs that can lead to middle-class incomes. They're going to be jobs that can be prepared for in relatively short periods of time, something less than a baccalaureate degree, something more than high school. So if you are a southern state that enjoys a tremendous quality of life, such as Arkansas, with great infrastructure, waterways, cheap energy, and you have Arkansans who inherently have a very strong work ethic, then I think we have a moral obligation to re-engineer our educational programmings so that we can give Arkansans every opportunity to reimagine their future based on this global economy, and as an end result, create a portion of our population that will have an access to a middle skill, middle income level future that never existed here before. And I think we are uniquely positioned as a state to have all those pieces in place. We just got to figure out how we play smarter.
Is Hillary going to run in 2016? Just curious.
All right.
We're going to finalize
You don't answer that question right now. You're
We're
waiting
going to finalize that this evening.
Tori, go ahead.
I'm Tori Huggins, and I'm a journeyman pipe welder for Local 155. I teach 18-week welding programs in Little Rock and kind of oversee 2 more programs, one in El Dorado and one in Fort Smith. I believe I'm here today to kind of show or enlighten y'all on the importance of apprentices in our country, and also having more diversity throughout that. You know, women, blacks, whites, Indonesian, male, it does not matter. So my programs, obviously, okay, welders are falling off the end of the earth practically. They're just retiring, going out, and there's a big demand for welders, apprentices, plumbers, HVAC, and all that too. But just kind of in my field as welders, not enough people are coming in. So in Arkansas, we are implementing these programs 18 weeks long, and that's all we do. We teach them how to weld. So when they come in and then they become an apprentice, they've already got a higher skill set as opposed to coming in as a first-year person. They can go straight to the jobs, start working. Another thing that we do with the 18-week programs, me, my bosses, and also my trustee committee for the apprenticeship school, we've kind of set an in-house goal to get 50% women or minorities. So I go out, I advocate for more women, and so many women don't even know that this is an option. And it is a very good trade. I've lived it. You know, I went the college route, was broke after college, and I fell into welding, absolutely loved it, and it's changed my life. So I'm trying to show people that apprentices, these trades, manufacturing companies, stuff like that, it should be another option along with college. It should not be a last resort. And I think a lot of schools push that as, well, if you're not smart enough to go to college, here's an option. No, it should be something that's, college is one way, right next to it is apprenticeship schools and welding and plumbing and all these other trades and stuff. So we're not just a bunch of dumb welders. I know that's the stereotype. A lot of construction workers are looked down upon when that's not the case at all and stuff. We don't build nuclear powerhouses, you know, which is just a bunch of peons that don't know what they're doing, so.
All right, good deal. Chris.
Tori, thank you. Dr. Fenner, thank you. And let me say thank you for having the opportunity to join such a great panel, and obviously to the leadership of the State Chamber. This issue, particularly from our perspective, Delta Regional Authority, 252 counties and parishes, 8 states, 200,000 square miles, about 10 million people. And one of the things that we've noticed in the 14 years that we've been around, we've been engaged in workforce development issues for a long time. We've been funding specific projects for a long time. But what I learned as a newcomer in this role is that this issue now is so important. We hear it every day with the business and industries that we work with. We hear it from the 2-year and technical stakeholders. We hear it from policy leaders and elected officials. And so what we wanted to do is to be a part of that echo chamber, to be an advocate for some of the conversations that need to happen, to force discussions and sometimes be a part of what we know we need to be saying, but we're not saying. or that we're addressing the issues that sometimes we may be afraid to because of the politics or the dynamics that you're dealing with. And the reality of it is, from our perspective, we've got two fundamental principles. And let me say on the front end, I am a disciple of AdTech and Glenn Fenner, because what they're doing is a model not only for Arkansas, but for our entire region and, quite frankly, the country. Number two is that we teamed up with Ted Abernathy. We took that original format of reimagining the workforce, and we did a Delta version of that. In fact, we've been in the works of doing 8 summits all over our regions, working in partnerships with governors, elected officials, local stakeholders, K through 12, anybody and everybody that will listen to us. Because the fourth category of that Ted didn't mention this morning that I want to touch on now is the timing issue. We've got to ramp up. We don't have time to continue to have the same conversations about workforce training and development that we've been having for 30 years. And thank goodness for the leadership of Randy Zook and his team to continue to engage and bring business and industry to the table, because from our perspective, it's very clear. When you look at this issue, when you're trying to make holistic changes, which we believe in pretty strongly, it needs to be systematic. It needs to be holistic. We need to look at the entire system as a system, not individual programs. We've got some amazing programs around the region. We've got some unbelievable training programs right here in Arkansas. But a lot of those programs are established as an end run or as a wraparound, not in cooperation with the system that we need to talk about. And if you want change, you're going to have holistic change of the model. Because right now it's not working at the level that we know that we need to meet for business and industry. That is a fundamental principle for us from a policy position. When we are addressing this issue, we need to have business and industry at the table. Not just at the table, but we need business and industry to be driving this issue at every level. K through 12, we need academics to take a second step back and let economic developers and business and industry leaders take this issue head on. We believe that fundamentally. And so in the context of reimagining the workforce, those 3 principles that Ted talked about this morning, we believe are fundamental. When you look at addressing your workforce needs at your local area, it needs to be regional, it needs to be holistic, it needs to be systematic, it needs to be addressed as a system and in partnership with economic development and business and industry. And so that's what we're trying to bring to the table to help bring that voice and add to that conversation. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, I was joking about y'all not sitting up front and this being like Baptist church, but I think we got some preachers up here on the stage with us today. Good job. No pressure,
this
Joe.
microphone, I feel
No
a little bit
pressure,
like
Joe.
Joel Osteen. I'm not liable to show up and show out.
Gotta start stomping.
It's great to be here. I had dinner with Randy Zook last night, and I was driving home from dinner thinking about the fact that my life is kind of a little out of control right now. I'll be in Reno and Cleveland next week giving keynote addresses to big manufacturing associations for Walmart. So I'm going to come at this a little differently. I'm here for 2 reasons. I'm here because I'm immensely proud of the company I work for that has said, you know what, we'll spend another $250 billion over the next 10 years to try to buy more goods made in the United States. We're in the middle of a rather complex effort to bring our big suppliers back from China into the United States, to take a look at places like Pine Bluff and Crossett, and to say things like, why can't we assemble bicycles in the United States when we haven't done that in 25 years? So my company is in the middle of that dialogue, pulling together big suppliers with economic development teams. That's the professional side of my life. But personally, as an adult, I grew up in Little Rock. I am an Arkansan. I love this state. And if you said to me, what does that mean? I think I have come to the realization that my wife and I, we have 2 kids, teenagers, one of whom is right in the middle of applying for colleges. So this is a real time in our family. We're talking a lot about these issues. But I realize my kids have many advantages that many children in this state don't have. So if you say, what is your personal journey as an Arkansan? It's to remind groups like this that we all need to be thinking much, much more about those kids that don't have the support at home. Fundamentally, I think if you take one thing home today, let's think about the fact that we really don't know what our high school kids are doing after they graduate. Because high schools are not trapping that data, school districts are not trapping that data, the state is not trapping that data. And it's sad. We need to figure out where they are going. I live in Bentonville. I love Bentonville. We have a thriving 4,000 person high school. We are building a second high school. We're about to break ground. We teach Mandarin Chinese in our high school. We do a lot of things right. But with all that said, I think we still only have 50% of our kids who are going on to four-year colleges. So we need to be thinking far more, what are the opportunities we are creating for those kids who are not going on? I think something good is happening here today. Now, there's a lot of complex issues. We saw some great presentations this morning that capture the complexity, but let's talk about the simplicity. The simplicity today is we have chamber people, we have economic development people, and we have educators. And you know what? You're actually in the same room. So let's think about the fact that actually getting in the same room and having the conversation is what it's all about. I spoke to about 40 Arkansas state legislators last winter. Did about a 40-minute presentation, then I took questions. First question. What taxes can we cut to make this easier for companies like Walmart to create new jobs? And I said, the reality is, we want to talk about taxes. Because if you say to me, what taxes matter? I say, we want an even playing field. We want the same advantage having a plant here as we do, having an operation here as a company does in Mexico. So we want an even playing field. But the real issue is quality of workforce. But you know what? Quality of workforce is hard. A bill that cuts a tax from 6% to 4% is a fairly simple piece of legislation, and you can probably go find the votes this afternoon. But to have the discussion, how do we integrate our high schools, our two-year colleges, our four-year colleges, and how do we integrate the 5 state agencies that are using your taxpayer dollars to find jobs for people, and who's doing what, and who's on first, and what's the new governor going to think? That's hard. That is complex. But we're doing something here today by all being in the same room that I think really starts the dialogue in the right way. And I also think we have some people who are starting to lead this discussion that matter. I think Randy Zook, who I consider a friend, is at a point in his career, he doesn't worry what people think of him. He has said, this is a signature for issue for us, this matters. We have guys like Roby who 10 years ago said, you know, media is changing, and you did something unique. You gave business a platform in a way that people pay attention to it. And that was hard to do in a state like this when you started. We have Jane English, who when you read Jane English's resume, she was worried about jobs and young people long before she ever said, I'll put my name on a ballot. And we have a governor who, again, was here this morning, who is a stabilizing force in uncertain times and who inevitably, I think, does the right thing and cares deeply about our kids. And I always think this is worth mentioning, a governor who grew up in very difficult circumstances and is a self-made guy and knows what it's like to be a kid with a single mother who's a waitress living in a very modest home saying, yeah, you know what, I can go to law school. And I can go on and have a good career, and maybe I can be governor someday. So we need examples like that for our children. So I will just close with the fact that what matters here today is we're all in the same room. And I think we're going to have a great discussion. This is a very interactive sort of thing that we have planned today. But thank you for being here. I will close with this thought. Walmart is a big company. We have a lot of things on the table that matter on any given day. I do think our commitment to jobs and the workforce and bringing jobs back from Asia into small towns in Arkansas and South Carolina matters as much to the company as anything we are doing right now, because that's how we will rebuild the middle class. That's how we will put more faith back in our consumers and spur economic growth on a number of levels.
All right, this is the point where you drop the microphone and walk off the stage. You see how that works? You do that. Glenn, let's come back to you. Great job, all 4 of you, in those introductory remarks. We're going to work our way down the panel on this. Business, government, the trades, education, all in the same room, all up on this stage together. I think everybody's identified the problem and a direction to move in. What's keeping it from happening? What's going to make it jumpstart like we know it needs to? What's the obstacles?
Well, I don't think you can know where you're going if you don't know what the end result desired initially is. And I think we need to step back from all of our educational efforts and admit that the one thing that we're trying to create is an opportunity for meaningful employment for Arkansans. So we first need to be talking to the people who are in control of that meaningful employment. We need to talk to our business and industry folks, find out exactly what skill sets they're after so that they can make a profit. Businesses making money is a good thing. There's very few problems that any of your communities, any of our communities in Arkansas face that a little additional tax revenue wouldn't go a long way in helping you fix. A part of the problem with states like Arkansas, who have historically floundered on occasion in terms of growing its economy relative to the rest of the country, is that we don't have enough positive investment at the end of the day to make because we're too busy reacting to the negative consequences of our educational models not creating more tax producers. We can't invest more money in our schools or in our bridges or in our social programs that are effective because we're too busy incarcerating people. We're too busy paying for the costs of our educational models, not empowering individuals to take care of themselves. So from my perspective, once you recognize that if we can all agree that the goal is to put people to work in a way that grows our state's economy, then the next question is how do we get there? And we also have to recognize that the first characteristic of a bureaucracy is to sustain its own existence. If our bureaucracies and our different components of this educational system were working appropriately, we wouldn't be in the cotton-picking mess we're in now. If you expect those bureaucracies in their current form to fix it, then you're badly mistaken. What we're going to have to do is establish a new way of funding these efforts, forcing K-12, post-secondary education, higher education to partner with one common goal. How do we reach as many Arkansans as fast as we can to give them a skill set to empower themselves and their families, and in the process grow Arkansas's economy in an unprecedented manner? And that's not going to happen chasing the same dog around the park we've been chasing. We're going to have to change what we're trying to accomplish and then change how we fund those efforts, forcing us all to play smarter together. And as I said earlier, Arkansas's got some very important tools at its disposal that if properly funded, you can see some significant results. You're still funding two-year colleges in this state at the same level you were in 2005. That's not smart in today's economy. We have not had an educational plan in this state since 1991, and that lasted about 9 years until 2000. In 2000, the plan for Arkansas became reacting to Lakeview, and that's all we've been doing since then. Until we establish a new goal and priority for our state and our investment in funding, you're not going to see any different results.
Well, I wish you'd be more blunt about how you feel about some of this. Tori, what obstacles do you see kind of impeding moving in the direction that everybody seems to have some focus and consensus on?
If I'm thinking on the terms correctly, there's one way to jumpstart. You were talking about jumpstarting things that we can do to fix this problem, right?
Yeah.
Okay. From my perspective, sticking with welding, I know Ted Abernathy, he didn't want to hear any more welding stories, but you're going to get a lot from me. There are so many schools that are trade schools and stuff, and I'm not dissing any of them, but like Oklahoma, Tulsa Welding School. People go there, they pay like $16,000, $20,000. They get a little bit of every skill, and after they're done, they don't find them jobs. They're not helping them. A lot of colleges kind of give you the diploma, see you later kind of thing. As opposed to the programs we have started, these 18-week programs, they're completely free, okay? We are taking mothers, fathers, single mothers, kids who are coming out of, right out of high school, people who have come out of jail, and they don't have a career to even start with. So we're taking anybody we can, and we're trying to turn them into professionals by putting all the training into them. And we're doing it for free because we're funded through the state. So congrats to the state on that. Appreciate it. But like some of these welding programs that let me jump back. They pay all this money while we're free the moment we get done training them through like 18 weeks, and then we give them additional training, but we put them to work. So they not only work on the job, getting on-job training, they're getting paid to stay in it, and then they're still coming and taking classes, 2 nights a week. So it's not them having to go out and get tons of school loans, not have a job, anything like that. We're putting them right to work and training them. So if someone who's come straight out of jail, most people don't want to hire them, And so we put all of our effort into taking them, training them, and then putting them in a job where they're going to have not a job, they're going to have a life-changing career.
What's a typical training period for an average student that comes through your program?
On the apprenticeship side, it's a 5-year program. So if someone comes in at first year, put them to work, they do 2 nights of class for 5 years, and then they turn out as a journeyman. Because there's such a shortage of welders, we did the 18-week program. So 720 hours, man hours logged. I start them out basic plate, and I work them through to where they're getting welding certifications. So they're as opposed to if they would have started out as a first-year apprentice, it would take them probably 2 to 3 years to get to where they would be at from just those 18 weeks.
Okay, no, great. Chris, what do you see obstacle-wise to keeping this progress from moving faster and in the direction that there seems to be a lot of consensus it should move?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, Roby. First of all, to coin a phrase that Randy Zook has said on more than one occasion that I think is so right on point. We need our system as a system, again, and that's, from my perspective, so important to this conversation, is that we need the system, we need the training programs, we need the institutions to work at the speed of business, where it becomes relevant. We know that there are persistent elements that are changing this conversation. We know that based on what we all heard this morning, demographics are changing, globalization has impacted this. We know that the expectation on the return of investment from our elected officials into these educational training programs has never been higher. We know the talent bar continues to increase every year, but yet we still have a fundamental breakdown and the connection and the alignment of various programs and various systems in place to meet the needs of business and industry on a basic fundamental level of trying to gain a skilled workforce. And so when we look at that holistically, that's the kind of conversation we need to be having. How do we take the funding models to incentivize and reward programs like AdTech? The current model right now in Arkansas does not fund AdTech. It's individuals like the Delta Regional Authority and others specific or specialty funding categories that give resources to make the kind of impact that the program that he runs over in West Memphis. The current system does not allow for that program to grow, to take that type of incentive and to create those programs because it is meeting the needs of business and industry. The other part of that is that how do we look at this as a overall strategy? How do we look at it from the perspective of economic development? Is that impacting our goal of economic development? We know we got the Department of Workforce Services. We know we got career education. These entities oftentimes take a back seat when we're having this conversation compared to other dynamics inside the way we do business in Arkansas. And that's the kind of stuff that we have to be willing to talk about as well. What's the priority? Well, the priority is that all the stakeholders got to be at the table. We have to have everybody at the table having this conversation. And how do we integrate that? How do we align the resources and stakeholders and partnerships to meet the end goal? What is the end goal? Is the end goal a 4-year institution? The traditional pathway? What we've done, as we've heard multiple times a day, and we've known this, the business and industries that are in the room, by the way, thank you for continuing to invest in Arkansas, continuing to invest in the Delta region and create jobs. Thank you very much. Because the reality of it is that the pressures on you are mounting every day on this issue. We hear it every time. You hear it from the governor all the time. What a great example of blending economic development and education. We know 9 times out of 10, every time we sit down with a prospect, what's the number one question? It's not the incentive. It's not the infrastructure. You get there. The first question is the education question. What is the skill level of your workforce? What's the educational attainment of your people? And incidentally, what's number 2? How healthy is your community? How healthy is your workforce? And are we putting strategies in place to deal with that as a system, both at the local level, regional level, and at the state level? That's why programs like a certified work-ready community, that's why programs like that are so important that we should consider here in Arkansas to implement. Other states are seeing that. And when I talk about the timing issue, this truly is one of the most important aspects of this conversation. Because this is such a national issue, because business and industry are saying, hey, wait a minute, time out. 5, even 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, Randy and I was having this conversation a couple of days ago. If you was to bring up the idea of life skills or soft skills that we heard some of the presenters talk about this morning, Joe, I'd be run out as, look at that liberal talking about work ethic and showing up on time and passing a drug test. And what does it mean to have a work ethic? Those type of skills now are mandated. We don't talk about that. Instead, what we did is that we created an environment for a long time because we all agree. We all want our young people, we all want existing incumbent workers or transitional workers or whatever you want to call it to continue that lifelong learning. That's what we want. But it doesn't have to be that traditional sense because for a long time we began to demonize trade, technical training, crafts. It was either or. If you didn't go to college, you're going to have to do that, and that was second place. It shouldn't be an either or. We should make sure we've got funding for career pathways that's in jeopardy. We should expand career coaching to the junior high level instead of it now being on the chopping block because of funding problems. That's how we address that issue, and we've got to do it collectively with all of us involved in that process.
In addition to some change, Joe, Chris is suggesting that maybe there needs to be a different incentive model and some more money. Walmart made $16 billion in profits last year. Do you think you could maybe part with a couple $100 million? Just asking, just from the home state's perspective.
Okay, now this is the point where you say we made 16, but I have to point out that was on sales of 450 plus. So margin-wise.
Oh, okay, all right.
So let's talk about obstacles a couple of times.
Yes.
Let me pick up where Chris left off. Attitudinal obstacles are huge. The average 17-year-old thinks of manufacturing like what his grandfather thought of manufacturing. It's dark, it's dirty, it's sort of scary. He has this image in his head, where in the reality, it's well-paying, it's high-tech, it's the new world. The State Chamber has pulled together a team I'm involved with. We're trying to raise the money to do outreach to young people to sort of remind them that it's a very different world they are living in. And it's kind of a complex discussion. How do we reach young people where they live, which is on their smartphone? And how do we get at their hashtag handles? And how do we remind them that manufacturing is not at all what they think it is? And that's going to be absolutely critical. And how do we come to town and go into schools and go into high schools and junior highs and bring that message to them? How do we create, you could take a room like this and you could do different manufacturing examples around it and let kids actually do some hands-on stuff to get a feel for what manufacturing could be in their future. So we're talking about how do we find the money and put together an effort like that to change those kids' attitudes, which certainly has to very much be a part of this. I think there are some other obstacles too, and I'll just tick through what I see as the top couple. I think for companies coming back from Asia and creating these jobs, they have a need for talent, but they're also struggling to find financing. And sometimes a company like that, AEDC would tell you this, they get their eyes on a contract, but then they have trouble finding the capital to put together the production facility. I think that is an obstacle right now. From a 50,000-foot level, let's talk about the Arkansas obstacle. Northwest Arkansas doesn't understand Little Rock, and Little Rock doesn't understand Northwest Arkansas. And frankly, as a state, we do not have the resources not to understand each other and not to work together. Bentonville is very different than Dumas. It's almost like, two different states in some ways. We have to overcome some of the lack of understanding within the state. The other thing I say to people all the time is are you approaching this as a region? Sometimes people say, what do you mean? I say, okay,
Great
I
point.
live in Northwest Arkansas.
Great point.
The region begins when you drive by the Razorback football stadium, and it ends at the last golf course in Bella Vista. That's my very unscientific description of a region. But I think what Northwest Arkansas does a pretty good job of, if jobs are coming to Springdale, we know they're going to shop in Rogers. If you're buying a house in Rogers, you might buy what you need. You know, it's like sort of, it's good for the region. So I think that matters. The other thing that matters is schools. My friends in Little Rock get tired of hearing me say this. In Northwest Arkansas, if you say to me, how are the schools different? I will tell you, the millionaires and the homeless, our kids are in the same school building. That's it. Pretty simple, right? Millionaires, homeless,
Yeah,
our kids are in the same.
there's just a lot more of one of them than the other.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm just saying that if
Spend some time in our part of the world.
but that is fixable in some communities.
Totally
and people
agree.
would like to address it.
Right.
But I do think
Right.
that if you have a community desire to support the school system across the board, you generally have a healthier environment for all of these issues we're talking about.
Well, you've lived in both communities. Why do you think it is? Why does that mentality exist in Northwest Arkansas, doesn't exist in another part of the state?
I can hear you on that microphone. It's harder to hear you on the...
You've lived in both parts of the state before. Why do you think that mentality exists in Northwest Arkansas versus Central Arkansas or other parts of the state?
You're going to get me in trouble with that. Well, and you're
You
right.
brought it up.
I mean, some of it, we have a thriving area where, I mean, I'll use Bentonville as an example. The Bentonville School District, we grow 800 kids a year. We grow 800 kids a year. We're out every year pushing millages because we basically have to build an elementary school a year to keep up. And we have, with some exceptions, communities that seem willing to vote and have the resources to vote for a new millage. So good-looking new buildings can attract people from all socioeconomic strata more than outdated buildings can. I will be the first to admit that. But I do think there is, with the schools, there is just a sense of community that, and I'm not saying, and I don't pretend that we have it all right in Northwest Arkansas, and we do have some economic advantages with big Fortune 20 companies, really, that make it a little easier than it is in Dumas or McGee.
Artfully answered there. All right, let's take some questions from you guys. Anybody in the audience want to ask a question of this panel here? Yes, sir. Number 3.
Good afternoon. My name is Kurt Jansen. I'm with Custom Aircraft Cabinets out of Sherwood. One thing that I think we're all on the right track, but I think generally the image of the state, I think we have an issue there. And case in point, I'm reading this wonderful little information request. And down at the bottom, it lists Little Rock, AK, Alaska. And I think, getting the people here is one thing. Training the people at the high school level, at the college level is a good thing. But what can we do to keep them here? In the aviation industry, we'll have people come in, they'll work the year so that they don't have to pay the relocation back, and then they're gone. So regardless of how much effort we put into training people, what do we do to retain the people in the state?
Who wants to take a stab at that and maybe speak about the frozen tundra of Arkansas?
Well,
that drives me crazy, by the way, too. So
the question is spot on, because I will say at Walmart, we don't really talk about recruitment. We always say recruitment and retention, and it's also, there's a sort of multiple layers to the question, which are, how do you have diverse families want to stay when maybe they are not finding the array of diverse support facilities for their particular culture? So, that's an issue with us. How do we sort of make all families feel welcome in Northwest Arkansas? I think part of it is image, that we all should feel good about a state that most of us love, and this is a great place to live. I can't imagine raising my kids anywhere else than where I'm raising them right now, but the image has to be a part of it. Again, the State Chamber is thinking about this. If we can do this campaign to change attitudes among young people, can we make the state feel better about itself on the whole, that this is a great place to live and work? And I think things like that can be platforms for recruitment and retention. When I got to Northwest Arkansas in 2006, at the time, there was kind of the tail end of the housing shortage. And everybody would say, oh, how long have you been here? 3 weeks. So have you found a house? And it was always this like, what is the housing market doing right then? Have you found a place to live? I don't hear that at all anymore. The first question when I interview someone who may be moving there or talk to them is, how are the schools?
Glenn, why don't you take a crack at that?
Well, I'm still hung up on this thing that Dumas and Bentonville are in different states. Might be like more different hemispheres or different universes, but Joe meant well. I know what he meant. I grew up in Northwest Arkansas before Rogers, Bentonville, Springdale was Rogers, Bentonville, Springdale. They suffered at that time in the 70s from essentially the same perception that much of the rest of Arkansas suffers from today. So what has happened in Northwest Arkansas over the last 25, 30 years? We've had significant investments in educational infrastructure. We have attracted great jobs. People, the reason that the Bentonville School District is growing by 800 students a year is not that they are multiplying by rabbits or like rabbits. It is that people are moving there who have the initiative to move their families to places where they think, because of some relative increase in the level of affluence, there will be more opportunities for their children and their families there. In eastern Arkansas, we have seen the reverse of that. But what you can learn from watching what happened in Northwest Arkansas is certainly applicable to the rest of our state. If we want people to feel good about their communities, if we want them to stay in the parts of Arkansas that people are presently leaving today, then we have to follow that same example. We have to invest proactively in great educational programs. We have to try to grow good jobs so that those communities can have people working every day, paying taxes so that we can improve the Dumases of Arkansas, the West Memphises, the Marianas. It's all the same conversation. I assure you, when I grew up in Charleston, Arkansas in 1978, the world ended past Fort Smith. There was no reason to go anywhere else. You might have gone to Fayetteville to go to school, but not everybody did that at that time. So if we can see what's happened in Northwest Arkansas move itself into one of the largest, most robust economic engines in the world, then why can't we learn from those same lessons for the rest of the state? And a part of the problem is that we don't get nearly as excited when we are voting to invest money in terms of making an investment in a place where we know the investment's going to return many times over. We're going to get more votes. We're going to have more people smiling. It's not as much fun to go make that investment in rural South and Eastern Arkansas. But my contention is that it is those regions of the state that hold the key to Arkansas's future. Northwest Arkansas is always going to be Northwest Arkansas now until we fix the rest of Arkansas so that it can become productive members of our family. Then Arkansas's economic future is always going to be limited.
I'll give you a quick example of how things can shift quickly too. It's one of my favorite stories is somebody produced for me last year a letter from Orville Faubus in 1963 when he was governor of the state of Arkansas. He was responding to a request for some economic development money from Charlotte Scheck-Snyder, who was the state representative down in Dumas in southeast Arkansas. And Faubus's letter, in his reply to her, he said, "Thank you very much, but the Delta is so rich and blessed at this point in life, I really feel like I'm going to have to steer this money up to these mountainous counties in northwest Arkansas that are among the poorest in the nation. They need the help much more than you do down in southeast Arkansas." That was just 50 years ago, 51 years ago. So think of the transition that has happened just in less than really in a half a century, how quickly things can turn around like that. Tori, let me ask you, we're talking about this retention problem here a little bit too. Do you see it in the training that you guys do once they're complete? Where do they go?
It has been a downfall. There's been a lot of it's kind of a crossroad almost. We need more contractors, we need more work, obviously, so then we can get more apprentices to put to those jobs. So it's kind of almost a little bit of a catch-22. We got to get more people, but we can't get more people in to train them if we don't have somewhere to send them. And if we get jobs, then, so it's a thin line. Which one, did the chicken lay the egg, or the chicken come first, or the egg,
Right.
Job-wise, I know I worked down in Florida at Turkey Point for like 16 months. There was 4,000 people that went down to that nuclear powerhouse down there to work. So those people, after they worked, hotels were paid into, restaurants, everything, all that money went back into that community. And I think we need to find that gap to, I don't mean we have to go build a whole bunch of nuclear houses, but different plants and stuff that are going to come back in Arkansas, so it's going to bring more people to us. Houston is booming, with all these factories and oil refineries and all these different places. They're like at a $42 rate down there. So everybody's wanting to go down there. We got to find a way to pull this back so we can start harnessing people in, train more, and get more jobs here so we can put back into our own community and grow. So,
Chris, what do you see? You obviously get to have your fingerprints in 8 different states at least, or 7 other states besides Arkansas. Who is doing something better than Arkansas right now?
Well, let me say a couple of things on that front. We are doing some pretty cool things in Arkansas. And in fact, the timing of what's happening in Arkansas is also very unique. The opportunity that we have, particularly what Senator English is doing, to have this holistic, systematic reform of workforce training and development could not come at a more important time. That part is very important. However, there are other states that are on the fast track because they recognize the need to be responsive to how the economies are changing in their states, how business and industries are now saying, look, if you do not address this at the speed of business, then we're going to have to make other types of decisions. And we know that we've had to address that here in Arkansas. This is not a new issue. And we can't afford to let one community go to the wayside. We can't afford to let one segment of our demographic go to the wayside because, quite frankly, we need the numbers to fit the jobs. We can't afford a single demographic group to fall to the wayside because we need the pure numbers. But there are some incredible things happening. For example, what's happening in Tennessee right now. In fact, I steal this phrase from Governor Haslam all the time. It shouldn't be about K through 12, right? It should be K through J, K through job. And what they're doing with the Tennessee LEAD program or the Tennessee Promise. Every student graduating high school in Tennessee has the opportunity to go get a certification, stackable degree, a community college or a 2-year degree, tuition free. The state of Tennessee, through their lottery scholarships, will pay for every senior graduating. At the same time, they're trying to reach a goal, drive 55% of their folks with some type of post-secondary, either certification or degree by 2025. Kentucky, one of the top 3 states in the country that's implementing this certified work-ready community program that I just talked about. It's a holistic, local, evidence-based relationship building that puts a focus on workforce training by letting business and industry lead that and pulling all the stakeholders together. And what's interesting about that is that now economic developers, and if you're an economic developer in the room, you already know this because Area Development Magazine, one of the top publications in economic development in the world, now actually uses that as a criteria to judge your state's economic development activity. The number of CRCs and the community work-ready programs. I'd also say Alabama would be my third example. Taking this type of example, we should put her in a video and poster and do a full campaign around what she's doing all over the state because that's exactly what the program in Alabama they're doing called Go Build Alabama, trying to change the perceptions of how young people and parents are viewing vocational and technical training. Those are just 3 examples.
There was a question over here at number 1, and I wasn't quick enough to jump on it. So would you come back and ask your question, please? Pretty please, with sugar on top.
I think she walked out.
You don't look like the lady that was standing at microphone number 1, but I'll take it.
No, but I do have a question. I'm Dwayne Pettigrew with Cooper Tire, Texarkana, and we've been working with a local college since 2009. We have trained our single craft skilled trades to become multi-craft. We've trained over 100 of them and continue to train. The issues that I see by working with the local colleges is getting the curriculum that we need and getting it approved through the Higher Education Board to get the skills that we need through that, and getting the funding. If they can't get the curriculum, they can't get the funding, and they struggle with that, and also struggle with getting the instructors that can actually do that. Because right now we've trained everybody in-house that we had, and as we hire, we train more. But we've got to go beyond that, because we can't hire enough people. We've been hiring skilled trades steady since 2009 and have not filled our need up to now. We still need more people. So our next step is to get high school kids, apprentice, somebody wanting to change career, military guys. I interview military guys all the time. I do the interviewing for our skilled trades, and they lack that PLC training, that what I need for them to come in and do troubleshooting. They say, well, where can I go get this training? Well, that's the problem. We struggle with that. The college don't offer that, hey, I need to go take this PLC training, and you come work for me. So how do we get that? How do we get the state of Arkansas to support that for the colleges and get us to where we can send a guy that wants to do a new career, military, to a college, get him what he needs so we can hire him. We want to hire the people. Problem is we need them a little bit farther, and we'll support it.
This
Robbie,
sounds like
I think that's a classic comment about the perception versus reality. I think the perception among the public is there aren't jobs.
Yeah.
That's why my 20-year-old is sitting at home in our TV room. The reality is you have a good Arkansas company over there that's been hiring steady since 2009 and has never hit full employment. And that's perception versus reality. And it's not just about how do we make the two-year colleges more nimble with their curriculum, but it's about how do we tell the story. And I think the story begins with young people like this who have done really smart, innovative things and are sort of exactly what we hope our state turns out, young people like you. And this is what Randy Zook is trying to do right now, which is put the money together to do a campaign to tell that story, to address why there are success stories. But again, I think you've been hiring steady since 2009 and you've never gone to full employment. That goes against what the stereotype is.
Dr. Fenter, I feel like you could definitely address this question of the need for speed.
Again, the reason that you're having the difficulty is that your need doesn't match any of the bureaucratic structure that Arkansas has in place. The global economy has changed. Our system for educating people has not. We were chosen as one of the 10 top workforce colleges in the South last year by a regional economic development publication, and we lost state funding. To answer your question or to address your comment, we bring about 500 high school students a day to our campus, involved in cutting-edge, world-class curriculum that is driven by business and industry, not by K-12, not by higher education, not by workforce education. We ask business and industry what they want, then we put the curriculum in place. It is a constant battle to get it approved. It is a constant struggle. We long since gave up on getting any money from the state. We've been able to bring in, primarily through divine intervention, about $68 million since 2005 to invest in the infrastructure, the facilities, the technology, the equipment, and the individual skill set to offer those programs, and are still going broke every day because the state's model does not recognize the value of those programs. We have a steady stream of issues within the bureaucracy in higher education about why do you have to have more money to hire a welding instructor than you do an English instructor. It's pretty easy to come to that conclusion if you're out there in the workplace, but it's very hard to get the bureaucracies to understand that there's a difference. If you look at the money that we have invested in this state, new money that's been invested since roughly 2000, the start of the Lakeview case, then you would expect that we would be better at doing what we're doing today than we are. The truth is that if you continue to give money to the existing bureaucracies and allow them to apply it to their old models, you'll never print enough money to make a difference. The only way to change this is to change how you fund what you're trying to produce in this state. And you do that by following the federal level, not that much different than the Department of Labor. Put some money out there, tell us that we have to partner K-12 through higher ed, through workforce, through state agencies, that we have to create this system that really works. And you'll give us some money to go do it. If we're successful, you let us keep the money. If we're not, take the money away. But do it with an economic development strategic plan that you use education to empower and create. And until you are willing to shake this world up sufficiently to apply that sort of model, then you're all just standing around whistling Dixie. You're going to have this same conversation 10 years from now and 10 years after that. We know how to fix it. It's just whether or not we got the guts to pull it off.
Let's go to microphone number 3. Your name and your question.
Thank you. My name's Elizabeth Smith. I work at the University of Arkansas. I oversee a program called the Education Renewal Zone, which promotes collaboration between the university and public schools. I appreciate, Chris, what you said, K to J. I don't think I've ever heard that before. In public policy, we talk about P20, about preschool through graduate school. But I'm really interested in partnerships like what you have, Dr. Fenter, at, with West Memphis and at Mid-South. And my question was going to be about how can we incentivize these partnerships through current state funding models, and you basically just said we can't. So I'm wondering, what do you think it's going to take for the sort of, transformation of our thinking about how to fund K-12 and higher ed to where we look at it as one system? And have you seen any models? Do any states or regions have models like this that already exist that we could copy and implement?
Florida has...
Before you answer that question, can I see a show of hands of all the state legislators that are here? Okay, just making sure they're all paying attention to this question. Go ahead.
Many states, like Florida, have adopted the P through J model, and they are working to some extent, but they are generally not able to push through the reforms that are really meaningful. Chris mentioned Tennessee. They've done a number of things of late that, as the educational empowerment zone might allude, create the ability to draw walls around bureaucracies of different aspects, whether it's K-12 or higher ed, and limit funding going to those bureaucracies that are not focused, those funds that aren't focused on creating that singular economic development outcome. For Arkansas, again, we have some very powerful tools. Our secondary workforce center model is a tremendously powerful tool. There hasn't been any new money put in that model in over a decade. Yet every state that comes to view our model in eastern Arkansas leaves there shaking their head, saying, how cool would it be if Alabama or Tennessee or Florida had the same model that Arkansas's Workforce Secondary Center concept represents? Chris mentioned earlier career coaches, career pathways. We have proven statistically over an extended period of time that those programs will take populations that are destined statistically to fail and cause them to be successful and retained at a higher level than any other program in the state. And yet over the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen the monies in those programs dwindle. Again, we have to agree on what our goals are. And if that is creating access to employment, meaningful employment, then there's a myriad of ways to get there. That doesn't mean we stop funding baccalaureate attainment. It doesn't mean we stop putting money in K through 12. It doesn't mean that you don't fund two-year colleges. It just means that you fund them in a way where they have to work efficiently and effectively together so that everybody benefits from the investments that's being made. I don't want to pick on Northwest Arkansas, but if you'll check any growing population center in this state, you're going to find some common characteristics, not the least of which will be significant investments of tax dollars in that growth, whether it's investing in universities that exist in those communities or Walton business schools or J.B. Hunt transportation entities. Those are all good things. They help growth. But have you ever stopped to think about the fact that the tax dollars paid by the person in Marianna is invested in that growing center of economic development that isn't in Marianna? We've got to find a way to make certain that everybody has a chance to achieve their God-given potential and then watch Arkansas flourish. We've always done a pretty good job of educating the top 10 or 15% of our population in this state. You go to high school graduations, they'll be announcing $40 or $50 million worth of scholarships, but they won't tell you that they're compressed into about 10% of the graduating class. What we've got to understand is if we're going to fix Arkansas, we've got to fix our weakest link, and that is the portion of our population for whom the old model doesn't work, and the portion of our population that, if left alone, is statistically destined to become a tax consumer. We got to find a way to invest in them so they can become tax producers, and then step back and think about all the great conversations we can have on how we can invest that new tax revenue that we've never enjoyed in positive, proactive strategies to continue to grow our state.
You touched on career coaches. How many career... Go ahead, Tori.
I was going to say something I think that might help that we can maybe think on of fixing the weakest link is when we have these curriculums that we put out, there were certain courses I took even through college where it didn't matter if I got it. You just got to go through it. We got to give it to you and stuff. One thing that I've done with these 18-week programs, if I just teach every little bit of welding that I know and give it to them, and they only know just a little bit of each one, when they go out on a job, they can't perform. So I'm slowing things down. Those who progress faster, I will give them more skills and stuff. But I'm not letting someone move on just to pick little by little. I'll test them in different areas to see what they really excel at. But I'm doing them no favors by giving them just a little bit of everything that they can't use, as opposed to really train them in on one thing. Then they're like a pro at that. They might only be able to get certain jobs, but now they can perform and do their job decently, you know.
That's interesting. The concept of career coaches came up here. How many do we have in Arkansas? Does anybody on this panel know?
Well, how many? Well, I think we started out with 28, didn't we, Randy? Or 28 schools were in the...
How many does Alabama have, Chris?
Career coaches? Well, they're doing actually a whole new alignment now. The governor actually just called a special session right after the election to do exactly some of the things we've talked about here, to force align educational institutions and state agencies and making the driving force of that new alignment based on economic development and the needs of business and industry. And so that concept is actually being reinforced all over. And it's a really, quite frankly, a matter of timing. It's not if we're going to do this, it's a matter of when are we going to do this and who are we going to follow in behind this. We have an opportunity to actually be a leader in this issue. The timing for Arkansas is right now, because the federal government's not going to solve this issue. D.C. is not going to solve this issue. We spent 15 years finally getting a reauthorization of the Workforce Investment Act, and what did we get out of that? Okay, we got some additional apprenticeship programs and in-place worker, and Jennifer said it last night at dinner, the best, right? It took us 15 years to basically do the same thing with the reauthorization of the Workforce Investment Act. That is no help. And you get back to talking about some of these examples. In South Carolina, for example, high school seniors, it doesn't matter if you got accepted to Harvard, Yale, or whatever your track is. When you graduate high school, you're graduating with a career ready certificate. You're going to graduate with that. And in fact, what they do a signing program for apprenticeships. They make it just like when we're recruiting a football quarterback. Can you imagine if we had the same kind of excitement and enthusiasm for doing a signing day for apprentice and career and technical programs like we do, signing up a player at the University of Arkansas to play football? How incredible would that be? I think it'd be pretty awesome.
All right, that's a great idea. All right, we got a question over at number 4 over here. Sorry for the delay.
No problem. Randy Alexander, I'm a state representative. I came up here to ask one question, but you've kind of pushed me in a different direction. I've been in education all my life. I can remember as early as the third grade getting the message that everybody needs to go to college. We had the book covers that showed how much more money you'd make and all of this. And then I spent my career at universities. And I've heard people say that every child can go to college. We have defined success so narrowly that we have a lot of very talented, creative people who have skills that we need, but we not only don't encourage that, we tend to label them as failures. My question has to do with something else that you said about shifting the paradigm. We can't keep doing what we've been doing and just add more money and expect a different result. I looked at some figures a little over a year ago. Many of you are aware that there's an algorithm that calculates how much of a four-year university and how much of a two-year university's funding they're getting. For example, NWAC, up where I am, Northwest Arkansas Community College, they're getting about 50% of what they should be getting. But when you split up the pie was so lopsided between four-year and two-year, you could have raised every community college in the state to 100% funding in 1 year, still had money left over to give the four-year schools that year, and then, of course, the following year, all the money is available for the four-year schools. I think that's the kind of thinking outside the box we need to do. We've got resources that could be redirected. We saw this slide up here that 25% only 25% need a bachelor's degree. How can we redirect that money? You know what kind of reaction we're going to get. But it seems to me that for a relatively small investment, the impact we could have on graduation rates, on employment in the state, would just be amazing. How do we do that politically?
Roby, could I do an opening thought to that? I'm going to say Our Kids First. Our Kids First became Mike Huckabee's signature program. Ultimately, we reduced the number of uninsured children by more than 70%. Ultimately, we were the first state to embrace an S-CHIP program, and we were ahead of our time on what became the healthcare reform dialogue. So I've just told you three reasons why, to this day, Huckabee still brags about Our Kids First. And I'm coming in the back door to your question. The governor made that his signature issue. I believe that whoever is our next governor can make workforce development the signature issue. I think it almost needs and has to be the signature issue. But when a governor makes it the signature issue and really puts all the office of the governor's office, and Chris and I both come from that world, then you see things start to move. And so whether it's a question of how do we redirect current funding or resources or public attitude, I think people like you in this room in your everyday life have to raise the level of discussion and say to whoever's the new governor, this is where it starts. And I think, to pick up again one final on Chris's point that the time is now, in China, the minimum wage goes up every year. The availability of labor drops as the country has spent years saying you should only have one child. So the immediacy is those jobs are about to come back to the U.S. And it's the states that are most aggressive and first in line and doing the right things that will get those jobs.
Anyone else want to take that question on? It's a good question, Representative.
I don't think the two things are mutually exclusive. I think there's a way to take the money that we are presently investing and create new expectations of what that money is required to produce that, in fact, will force all of the different silos to have to play smarter together, everyone winning. There's absolutely, again, nothing that I can think of in Arkansas's distant past or immediate future that increasing tax revenue won't help you address. And when we can find a way to put more Arkansans to work faster in what now is an unprecedented opportunity for them to gain a middle-class existence in a very short period of time of training, then that tax revenue helps you solve the issue of who's getting what in terms of investment in the future. But today, all we're doing is fighting over scraps. We're continuing to cut the pie smaller and smaller. There's not enough resource to go around for anybody to do the kind of job that they need to for our state's future.
We could also cut legislative salaries to zero. That would help. We could do that too. I'm just kidding. All right. Do you have a question too, sir? All right. We'll go number 3 and then number 4. And then we're going to need to wrap up after that.
Okay, Roby, Michael Garner with Hodge again. Dr. Fenner, you touched on it a little bit. Tori, you're an example of it. I have the opportunity to cover most of the states in the Southeast. This is not a singular problem. We do have some good programs, good 2-year colleges, good 4-year colleges, and good high school programs here in the state of Arkansas that are doing technical training. I'll focus on advanced manufacturing and CNC machining. We have programs at Rich Mountain Community College in Mena, which is working with high schools and as a 2-year college. We have obviously Mid-South Community College in West Memphis. When we look across the Southeast, the number one problem seems to be the quality of the instructor. Most all the schools across the Southeast are faced with the same funding issues. They're trying to attack it from a legislative standpoint. They're trying to attack it from a private sector standpoint. But it still comes back to being able to acquire and retain a qualified instructor. When I look at the programs across the Southeast from Arkansas to North Carolina, the one thing that stands out about the good programs is the quality of the instructor. So my question to you is, people in this room, there's some quality instructors in this room, there's some educators in here. You know, I'm concerned that they're going to leave here still a bit confused. What can they do when they go back to their school? What can they do to make a difference in any of their programs with looking at the quality of their instructor?
You want to go first, Tori?
I've had instructors and I've had teachers that the moment they walk into the classroom, they're just trying to draw a paycheck. You know, their enthusiasm is just to get through the class that evening. Instantly, when they cross into that room, all the students are lost. We're just, well, now we just want to get through the class and stuff. So all our enthusiasm went down when the instructors did. And, I mean, you're going to have that. There's going to be instructors like that that are everywhere. But we need to find a way that we get instructors that are coming in, kind of like you were talking about with, we're recruiting. We're about to go play a basketball game or something like that. You know, we need to draw in a team. We need instructors coming in that door with enthusiasm and excitement to teach what they know. That's why before I became a welding instructor, I never thought I'd be good at it or anything like that. And through it, I have learned so much about myself, and I've learned that well, let me think. I have that passion. I have that passion, and I want to give it to them. I get upset when my students are not doing good or they're horseplay and stuff, because I know how their lives are about to change. I've lived it. So it's hard to always get that from every instructor, but I think that's the biggest thing, is we've got to have people that have the passion for each thing. And honestly, not because I'm an instructor or anything like that, but I think educators over the whole U.S. and everywhere are underpaid for what they do. From kindergarten up, they put in so much time. And before I was a welding instructor, I would have been like, I shouldn't make that much. They're just teaching. But now that I'm doing it, I'm on the other side of the fence, and I see it, and I'm like, they go in every day busting their butts to try to give someone else a better life than they've got right there. Half my students are making more money than I am right now, and I just taught them, a year ago. So, but it makes me very proud, and that's why we do it. Not necessarily for the money, but because we want to give back and have other people, go through that life.
Maybe you could take a year off and go make what they're making to catch up. All right.
But I do think he's exactly right. There's nothing more critical to the success of a particular program than the talent level that you can attain in the faculty. And it is very, very challenging. I know Arkansas still has a cyclical battle in nursing programs. Very difficult to create the nursing programming slots that we need in this state, because we can't compete with what wages that the nurse can make practicing nursing. Can't get them in the classroom. But I still believe it comes down to your priorities. Somehow or other, we managed to hire football coaches and pay them whatever it takes to get them. We managed to figure out how to fund extravagant facilities on campuses through private donations. It just depends on what your true goal and final end product outcome is. And until we're ready to get serious about investing resources in a model that says we are going to win this war, we're going to create the programs that work, we're going to hire the talent level required to see them work. Until we're willing to do that, then we're not going to get much different result than we've been getting for the last 20 years.
I don't want to see anybody tweeting out that Glenn Fenner just said that they're starting a football program at Mid-South.
I can't afford to hire the coach.
Last question right over here.
My question centers around part of my job in the development corporation that I work at. We do applications. We receive applications for local companies. And I see people come in the door and they say, well, we don't have any jobs in this area. There's no jobs in this area. We don't have any jobs in this area. Yet we've got a local company that pays very well, and their hiring is open all the time. And I talk to them and they're like, well, we got people that come to work and they don't know that they need to show up tomorrow. They don't know that they need to be here 5 days a week. They don't know once their truck payment's made, you might ought to come to work tomorrow. And I look at, and I forget now which one of you said, I wish we got as excited about education as we do about sports. And for gosh sakes, don't think I'm bashing sports, because I don't want kids to look like I do. Okay? If you had sports, anyway. But the question is this. We have a robotics team that we've just started in the community that I'm in, First Robotics. And I watch these kids' eyes, and I'm watching these kids develop, and they're learning stuff. These are high school kids. I'm doing a little electronics class with 2D batteries and a light bulb. And I watch these kids' eyes, and it's like they've never seen that before. And I'm like, my gosh, I grew up making stuff in the garage. And I wonder, how can we encourage? You can't have your schools parent. That's what we're really asking. That's what we're really wanting our schools to do, is to parent our kids. How do we come back and encourage the public and encourage the parents as a state to get behind these kids and push? And to say, you know what? Education is important. Vocational training is important. What you do with your life past high school is important. And how do we get excited about that? And how do we show them that there's more to life than just getting a diploma?
So, an hour 25, I play a game with myself. How long into a meeting before the word parent finally comes up? An hour 25, just pointing that out. And but the larger point the gentleman made is spot on, the soft skills. A potential employee who right out of the box says, I don't know if I can be here 5 days a week. If you get alone with big company HR directors, you would be astounded at the number of potential employees who fail the drug test and fail the background check. Everybody spends money, and the trucking companies at lunch talked a lot. They do a lot of background and drug testing, but the amount of money spent on potential employees who don't make the cut, it's a lot of money. And he is exactly right. The soft skills matter. The ability to do a resume, the ability to make eye contact, the firm handshake, what to wear to an interview. As a friend of mine in HR said to me yesterday, have you shaved and pressed your pants? Have you shined your shoes? Do you look going in like you're an employee who's going to be here 5 days a week? And those are hard skills to teach.
Yeah. You came back.
Well, the fact is that right now, Roby, 1 in 7 youth in this country are not connected to the fundamentals of success. What are fundamentals of success? You're either working or going to school. 1 in 7.
It's actually 5.8 million students or young people between the ages of 16 and 24 are at home with no marketable skill set, no plan other than to find Jerry Springer as many times during the day as they can on the TV.
And that is an issue of competitiveness for our communities, for our states, and that is a pure competitive issue that we have to be addressed. And we are asking schools not only to parent, but to teach, and now we're saying we've got to even reverse the clock. We got to get back earlier, and now we've got to expose them to the world of work, as we should much earlier, and it must be integrated into our curricular system.
Let's try to end us on a good note, and y'all are buzzkills up here with this. Last question, and make it a good one, because we got to wrap up.
Yeah, my name is Denise Hill, and I'm with Eaton Corporation in Mountain Home, Arkansas, and I want to share a success story.
Yay!
So,
Yay.
I'm the president of an HR group in Mountain Home, and we've gotten together over the last several years and complained about all these soft skill issues. People don't remember that they're supposed to show up to work on time. They don't understand the importance of being there every day. So we deal with that every day. To our meeting, occasionally would come our community college, Arkansas State University in Mountain Home. And we got together and worked with them, and we came up with a great plan. We have a mechatronics program that provides a lot of training for some of the trades. And part of that curriculum is that they're held accountable for attendance. They're being trained in lean manufacturing. They're being trained in environmental health and safety aspects that are important in manufacturing today. They're being trained in why we want people to come to work on time. They're just being trained on all the soft skills, but they're also getting the trade skills that they need. So I just wanted to share that in Little Mountain Home, Arkansas, we're doing something really good. And it's because industry and education came together and made that happen. So I just would like to let everybody know that it is possible. So thank you.
Congratulations. And that's exactly how we're going to deal with this issue.
Do what now?
That's exactly how we're going to deal with this issue, even the political issue. The politics in this thing is actually right. People at every level, at the local level, at the regional level, they recognize that we have to do something because it is about being competitive. And that kind of example is exactly what we're trying to advocate for. Congratulations.
All right, and thank you to our panelists, Glenn, Tori, Chris, Joe. Thank you very much for all your wonderful insights and y'all for your questions.